Hi, this is Paul, and today I'm going to show you how to use BCC Flicker Fixer in DaVinci Resolve. So here I've got two clips, both of them flicker, but in different ways. This one has kind of a sporadic, irregular flickering happening, and this first clip of clouds has a more consistent flicker across the whole image. So we're going to use BCC Flicker Fixer on both of these, and in different ways. So let's get started. So we're going to do this clip first. And one good thing to do when you're looking at flickering is to open up your video scopes. So if you play back while the video scopes are open, you can clearly see if there's any flickering or jumps in the luminance or color channels on your clip. So I'm going to leave this open, and I'm going to apply BCC Flicker Fixer directly to it. And if you see any kind of weird stuff like this going on, don't worry, just reset your cache. There you go. And if I play back now, and you look at the video scopes, you can see that they no longer jump around sporadically. There's no sudden peak in the color channels, and it's very smooth now. It doesn't play back real time, of course, because it's doing a lot of processing, but even so, you can see it's much more stable than it was before. To get a better look at this, you can use the built-in compare mode, which is at the top of the filter here. So if I'm looking at it side by side, get a better view, and play this back, again, even though it's not playing back real time, you can tell that the left side, which is unfiltered, is flickering a lot more than the right side, which appears very stable compared to the unfiltered clip. So this is another way you can check to make sure the Flicker Fixer is doing what you need it to do. So if you have to make changes to the Flicker Fixer, there's a few things you should know. There are two methods, frame analysis and temporal. Frame analysis is useful when the whole image is flickering. So in this case, the entire clouds are flickering about the same amount, and it's pretty regular. So that's when you would use frame analysis. The controls that you have here, the time window, is how many frames the filter looks at before or after your current frame to see what the normal brightness should be. The time window cutoff just kind of smooths that out. Faster analysis just makes the filter run a bit faster. I recommend leaving that checked. And smoothing physically smooths the colors, so the color changes that the filter has to make to compensate for the flicker. So those are all useful tools right there. And then you also have limit sampling. Now, let me turn off compare mode quickly. So, as I said, the frame analysis method is when the whole screen flickers, but let's say you have a flashlight or lamp or something in your scene, and that's the only place where flickering is happening. Well, if you enable limit sampling, you can move these crosshairs right here, or make changes to the values in the UI, and just isolate the area around the flicker. So that will make the filter more accurate and a bit faster. But again, this method, frame analysis, works much better when the whole frame is flickering and not just a small bit of it. Okay, so we did a pretty good job removing the flicker from this shot. Now let's look at the second one. So if I play this one back again, as I was saying before, sometimes the flicker doesn't affect the whole shot. Like in this case, the sky is the only part that's strongly flickering here. So when we apply Flicker Fixer, we could use frame analysis, and in fact you do get a pretty good result on this shot if you do, but you also should probably consider temporal smoothing, since at least half the shot isn't flickering at all. So temporal smoothing works very differently than frame analysis. It blends the frames before and after your current point to smooth out the flickering, and there are two ways you can go about that. You can blend the RGB channels or the YCC channels. So at that point, the difference is just RGB versus YCBCR, and you have a range for each one. So like how strong will the flicker removal affect each color channel, and whatever the proper settings are will depend on the colors in your clip. I found that on this particular footage, the RGB channels are just kind of easier to control. They give me a better result, but your footage may be different. Okay, so the other controls here, the smoothing, the color range, and the max frames, these are similar to the controls we had in frame analysis. The smoothing is kind of the strength or the overall flicker reduction. I'm going to boost that all the way for this clip. The color range also has kind of a smoothing effect. It blends the channels more or less together. And the max frames, similar to the time window in frame analysis, is how many frames the filter looks at before and after your current position. So again, on this clip, I'm going to boost that to 5. And I'm going to take the color range down to 50 to reduce some of that smearing you may have noticed in the clouds. And if I go back into compare mode, side by side, and play this back, I can see that it has done a great job reducing the flicker. Now in this mode, you may see a little bit of brightness creeping in, but in the first place, if you do notice it, it should be much smoother. It shouldn't catch attention anymore. And you can always try to increase the smoothing or color range or max frames to continue removing whatever brightness flickering there is. But this clip, I think, is actually successfully deflickered. And there are other controls in the Flicker Fixer. You have matte and mask controls. For the most part, you're going to avoid these, but if you have to know what they're used for, they are for when part of your image doesn't need to be flicker fixed, so to speak, or you want to just kind of avoid the flicker reduction algorithm in a certain part of your screen. It's kind of complicated to try to explain in this video, which is why we include really helpful help files, which you can launch right here, which go into much greater depth than most people's patience will allow me to go into in this video. So I recommend checking out those help files for a more in-depth guide on how to use the filter. And that's pretty much it. So a quick introduction to using BCC Flicker Fixer in Resolve. So if you liked what you saw here and want to try it out for yourself, you can download a free trial version from our website, and that's borisfx.com.